It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant Prime.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, the mobile app. Those of you watching on YouTube as well. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Multiple ways you to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up using Giants Chat, hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. He is at GiantsWFAN. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. We are broadcasting, as always, from the Giants Podcast Studio. It is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better as we gear up for Broncos-Giants. We've been talking a lot about this matchup throughout the week. You and I were on earlier. But in terms of the latest injury report, let's start there, Paul. Brian Daboll spoke to the media earlier today. He did not officially rule anyone out. But if you look at the latest injury report, and this is based on what we saw late yesterday, and the Giants have several players. I think the two that are most noticeable in terms of it's hard to believe that they'll turn the corner, and that's just our personal opinion. Darius Slayton did not practice each of the last 2 days, and he missed the last game with the hamstring injury. And then John Michael Schmitz is still in concussion protocol, and he did not practice each of the last 2 days. And I would say those by far are the two biggest names on the injury report. So as we're sitting here early afternoon on Friday, barring a miracle or a drastic turn of events, I would say the Giants are probably going to be without the services of their starting center and one of their key wide receivers.
Right, and of course the two guys who came in for them last week, that would be Adam Schlotman, who had to come in mid-game. Austin Schlotman, who came in mid-game during the Philadelphia contest. According to Carmen Brassol, we just talked to him this morning, he said he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He handled the job, filled in admirably. He said, look, the guy's played in this league before. It's not like he's never done it. So we knew what he could do, and we knew what we were going to get, and he did fine. He said, I'll be honest, that was expected. You know, and so he was getting quizzed like, you know, how surprising was it, and do you think he can do it again? And Brasillo's demeanor was like, okay, that's his job.
He's a veteran player. He's been in the league.
You know? I mean. So, look, I understand. I've, in all honesty, when he was with the Vikings, I wasn't all that impressed. But the truth of the matter is, he did do a good job against Philly when he had to come in last week. And now he's got to go up against this very difficult Broncos front. As far as the receiving spot, is anybody going to complain about what little Jordan Humphrey did last week? I don't think so.
He played great. Yeah, I'm completely with you.
So, you know, again, and that's not a sign of disrespect to Darius Slayton in any way. Please don't take it that way. But little Jordan Humphrey gave them some production. What was a 34-yard early completion? And then I believe he finished with, 4 catches for 55, right?
I'm going to look that up to confirm, but that sounds about right.
And that's fine. For a backup receiver to come in and give you that, you'll take it.
No, he made some big plays. He had great chemistry with Jackson Dart. You want to see him make those contested catches, 4 for 55, so you're right on point with his longest being 34. He was targeted 8 times. He was actually the most targeted player in the receiving corps. Wan'Dale Robinson had more receptions, but he was targeted 1 less time than little Jordan Humphrey. And we mentioned they built a strong rapport throughout the course of the preseason. Remember, he threw the touchdown pass to him, Dart, in Buffalo.
Dart's first one ever.
Absolutely. And at least it was insinuated. I'm not saying that the coaching staff only did it because of conversations they had with Dart, but it was laid out that when they were going over who would be called upon to fill in, that Dart certainly gave his vote of confidence for a guy like little Jordan Humphrey because, once again, he's had a lot of reps under his belt. What a lot of people, we tend to forget when somebody assumes the starting job, but, Dart came in, he was with the second and third teamers. So he actually has had a lot of reps with players that were on the bubble, on the practice squad, on the back end of the depth chart. So this actually is an easier adjustment period for him. You could argue he had to work to get on the same page with the Wan'Dale Robinsons and the Darius Slaytons of the world.
Absolutely.
More so, Paul, right, than the other members of the receiving corps. And you could go down the list in terms of running backs, offensive linemen. Actually, on a related note, Dart was even asked, outside of the coaches, what about Austin Schlottman taking over at center. And Jackson goes, well, I actually took snaps from him all throughout the bulk of the summer because I wasn't working with JMS, given he was with the number ones.
Correct.
Yeah.
And truthfully, the other item that I think is important here is that little Jordan Humphrey, who I spoke with extensively yesterday, said to me, look, he's not going to be shy about it. He shared a bunch of different tips about his former Broncos teammates. He spent the previous 2 years in Denver.
Sure.
He knows all about Patrick Surtain and about a lot of those guys on that Denver Broncos roster. And look, I even said to him, do you think it's more to your benefit or more to their benefit? He goes, well, I know a lot about a lot of their guys. They only know about one of him. So, I'm sure that Jackson Dart has probably peppered little Jordan Humphrey about that secondary as much as he possibly could. And if he hasn't, I'm sure he's going to do it tonight.
Without a doubt, but at the end of the day, Dart, all he has to do is put on the film, and I think he understands how strong the personnel groupings are.
It's pretty scary, isn't it?
It is. Listen, we talked in great detail earlier in the week, and it's not to paint the picture that the Giants can't be competitive in this game and can't win the game. It's just it's an honest assessment of what has been statistically, okay? This is not opinion. Denver had one of, if not the best defense in the NFL last season, okay? And all they did was they picked up where they left off a year ago, and they've benefited from continuity. They have the same defensive coordinator in Vance Joseph. They have pretty much the bulk of the same playmakers. All of these guys, they didn't come out of the woodworks. They didn't poke them out from the street. So when you combine all of those factors, yes, they deserve their accolades and pat on the back because they've been by far the most consistent defensive unit in the NFL for a year and a half thus far.
They talk about the old Denver no-fly zone, which they've practically replicated right now this season. They're nearly that good. And then on top of it, you've got Allen, who has re-energized his career, since coming over
free
to
agent
Denver.
pickup. Yeah.
Really was a good signing for them.
Tremendous.
And when you consider that Bonito's on the other side, well, now all of a sudden the pass rush is a lot more potent than even it was last year when Bonito had 13 and a half sacks. I mean, he didn't come out anywhere.
No, well, that's what I'm saying.
Bonito was already good. But imagine how much better he is now that Allen and he are both tied for the NFL lead with 16 quarterback hits. I mean, these guys are legit. But here's the one thing. If you want to look for the Achilles heel or the bruised spot on the Broncos' apple, it's their linebacking core, their coverage units in particular, their coverage ability of the linebacking core. Their edge guys are interested in just getting after the quarterback. They want to crash down on the line of scrimmage, stop the run, and get after the quarterback. Their edge guys or their outside linebackers are not very interested in covering the pass. So you can do some damage working into those little holes. The other item is that Singleton, the former Philadelphia Eagle, who the Giants know well from playing in this division, he does not have very much range. He has a lot of trouble covering guys coming out of the backfield. Earlier this year, just a couple of weeks ago, when Philly played the Broncos, Barkley's 47-yard catch and run on a wheel route out of the backfield
up the right sideline,
was against Singleton, and he absolutely roasted him. Singleton this year, and I gave this number the other day, and I can't remember if I gave it to you guys or I gave it to someone else on a different show. Singleton this year has allowed 25 completions on 32 targets. I mean, teams have gone after him. 340 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 340 yards is the second most receiving yardage allowed by an NFL linebacker this season. He is a guy that people pick on. He's just one of those guys. He's a hold the fort guy, as Parcells used to like to say. He is not one of the leading components in this dangerous Broncos defense. So that's where you want to attack. And it seems to me that if you're the Giants and you've got Cam Scatterbo, who can catch the ball coming out of the backfield, you've got Tyrone Tracy, who is exceptionally good at it, and also, by the way, has the speed to take it the distance. We talked about this with Jonathan Casillas yesterday on the show. That's where you want to concentrate on if you're the Giants. You want to run it, and then hit those intermediate passes in the linebackers area, because that's where the Broncos can be dented. The Jets, for some reason, did not do that last week. I have no idea why their game plan was what it was, but they did not attack Denver's weakness, and it showed because their offense was atrocious.
Well, you talk about a 13-11 game, so I think that tells you all you need to know. I think the onus is on the Giants' run game in this matchup. I think it's a must because, and I mean the conventional run game, okay? Let me specify, Paul, because Denver actually has done a really nice job containing mobile quarterbacks. If you look at all the quarterbacks they faced, and they have faced a lot of players, and we went over this earlier in the week, the Justin Herberts, the Cam Wards, they have not had much of anything on the ground. So it's got to be Cam Scatterboo. It's got to be Tyrone Tracy. If we see a little Devin Singletary, you need to use your conventional backs to do a lot of the heavy lifting in this game, because I think they're pretty well disciplined in containing quarterbacks and keeping in the pocket. And the reason why the run game is so critical, this is not the type of team. And you can tell me all you want about the offense is not lighting up the scoreboard, but this is not the type of team that you want to be in third and longs, even second and longs, where you allow them to get comfortable in pass rushing situations, because that's where they thrive. With the quarterback hits, Paul, that you referenced, the 30 sacks that leads the NFL, that's why the run game early on is so critical. If you could keep Jackson Dart in 3rd and 5s and 3rd and 4s, that at least gives the Giants the flexibility where they can still run the football with Scatterboo and company, but also you're not looking for the home run. I think if you're looking for the home run in a game like this, I think that plays right into the hands of the Broncos to get quarterback hits, sacks, which could lead to takeaways and all types of negative stuff that could change field positioning, and they will do it every which way. I know you mentioned there's some weaknesses with respect to the coverage unit, but the one thing they've done a really nice job, they have spread the wealth. 12 players have at least half a sack. It's not one guy. And even Brian Dable emphasized that. You know, Paul, we've seen you go up against good pass rushing teams. Sometimes you have two guys that pretty much account for the bulk of the sacks. So if you had 30 sacks on a team, you could see if they have two elite edge guys, they may account for 18 or 19 of the sacks. With Denver, you got some guys with 2 and some guys with 1 and some guys with 3, which means Vance
12
Joseph
with at least a half.
Yeah, but the point is,
that's what that tells you.
But Vance Joseph, my point is, he's maximizing the play calling and utilizing the personnel so that everybody can find openings as opposed to them relying on one guy in particular.
I think what you just said is incredibly important, because as I look at the tape of the Broncos defense, yes, Allen is talented. Yes, Bonito is very talented, who, by the way, he will almost always be over Andrew Thomas. They don't flop him to the other side very often at all. He is going to be right in Thomas's grill.
Which is the guy you want on Bonito.
Well, sure you do.
So, from the Giants' perspective, I mean, that's the matchup.
But I think that the important component about what you just said is overemphasized when you look at this Broncos D, because I believe it's truly their scheme that has created the incredible number of sacks and the dilation between them and the rest of the league, more so than their pure talent. Yeah. I really believe that, because here's what they do. They're using Hufanga like Palomalu was used on the Steelers. You will see him lining up at free safety, at single high safety, at strong safety. He's going to be at weak side linebacker. He's going to be lining up in slot. He's going to be all over the place. There are times he's going to be lining right up on the line of scrimmage in one of the gaps. They will have him playing so many different positions and then changing his role within those positions. He is the true wild card. I believe that Hufanga may be the most critical, most dangerous X factor on the Broncos defense, despite the fact that Bonito is a sack monster. You mentioned it. Thomas can neutralize him, or at least contain him. Hufanga is the guy. By playing chess, Joseph is going to move him all over the place. That's the guy who Jackson Dart's going to have to read when he's figuring out at the line of scrimmage, how am I going to deal with this play? And he's got to be looking at Hufanga. That's the first guy Dart's got to look at. It's not Benito, because you know where he's going to be. Hufanga, you have no idea where he's going to be. And that's going to determine what Dart is going to have to do at the snap.
Because they're going to move him down by the line of scrimmage. He'll be on the back end. I mean, he's a versatile, do-it-all type of player. So he may even be somebody that they use to shadow Jackson Dart here or there, too.
He could be a spy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Depending on what Vance Joseph decides.
That he causes. Because he truly is a jack of all trades. He does model his game after Polamalu. And the Broncos, to their credit, have allowed him to take on that role. He's good at it.
Also, another player of note, since we focus more on the Giants injury report, Dre Greenlaw, his window was opened up from IR. He dealt with a quad injury earlier in the season in training camp, so they put him on short-term IR. They opened up the window. It's possible that he returns, probably a limited role. I was listening to Vance Joseph's press conference and also what Sean Payton had to say earlier in the week. It seems as if they're keeping things close to the vest, but that's no surprise. That's coaching 101. But all signs seem to point towards there's a chance he may be in uniform, and they'll sprinkle him in as they work him back in slowly. So here's another veteran, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, a very talented linebacker. I'm not saying he's going to be a game changer on Sunday, but we're talking about Joseph capitalizing and utilizing all the personnel. Well, here's now another veteran that he'll have in the mix in that middle of the defense to help clean up in terms of the run game and maybe from a coverage standpoint as well. I mean, Greenlaw's dealt with some injuries in recent history.
Well, a quad right now.
But even before that, he was dealing with a lot. But you look at what he did in San Francisco with the Fred Warners of the world. I mean, those guys were a deadly two-man punch and then some.
That's one of the reasons why the Broncos' track record so far is so incredibly impressive, because they're the top defense in the league for so many different reasons, and yet that one bruise, their linebackers' pass coverage, well, you can tighten that up as soon as Greenlaw gets in the lineup, because that's what he does really, really well. When he gets back, this defense is going to be even more dominant. I truly believe that. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Joseph's quotes yesterday to the Denver media were that he might be ready for a part-time role.
Yeah, limited was
which
pretty
says
much what he
to me
insinuated.
maybe the sub-package. Maybe he plays some third-down snaps at most. But, you know, when he gets himself into the groove and is going to be a regular part of that D, the Broncos defense, the sky's the limit as they go to the second part of the season, because they've got it going.
Yeah, and I think they're also in good shape, God forbid they suffer an injury, that they have so many playmakers that feed into the team component that you were talking about, that most teams, you know, they lose one guy, it's over. But I think Denver's better prepared for that because they have so much weaponry that they can tap into, and that's the biggest challenge for the Giants in terms of keeping tabs on where all of this personnel is lining up outside of course, Nick Benito. Now, let's flip the script. I think the one area from an advantage standpoint for the Giants, their defense against Denver's offense, is the offensive line, and specifically the guard spot, because Matt Peart, who I was talking about earlier in the week, I was joking it could be the Matt Peart revenge game going up against his former team, but he's not available anymore. He's on injured reserve as he suffered a knee injury and played through it, by the way, against the Jets. So they're testing out a few different options at that guard position to be determined in terms of who's going to be next to Garrett Bowles throughout the course of this game, and that could be an area where maybe the Giants can put some pressure on Bo Nix and get that pocket collapsed. I mean, if there's one advantage that could create a pathway to wreak havoc, not that the Denver offense is electric, but the Denver offense, the philosophy has been, and I was even listening to the approach of Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, and he was asked about, you know, how things maybe were a bit conservative down the stretch in the Jets game, and he said, hey, with the way our defense is playing, we're not going to rock the boat. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but once again, you connect the dots.
They know who's driving the ship.
Without a doubt. So that's part of the reason why Denver has not lit up the scoreboard, it's partially because of design. They're saying to themselves, why are we going to have Bo Nix air it out or put the ball in a dangerous area when our defense is going to keep the game within the high teens, low 20s, and as long as our offense milks the clock, moves the ball, tacks on field goals, we will do enough to win the football game. So that's another reason why I wouldn't read so much into going through the scores and saying, oh, Denver's scoring offense is not that great. Yeah, they've run the ball effectively with J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, their rookie quarterback. Bo Nix has made good decisions, and that's their M.O.
You know, it's really pretty simple. If the Broncos are able to control the game flow of the contest, you're playing into their hands. It's just that simple. Once they get their grips on the game flow, they control the tempo. They control exactly how the thing is playing out. You're in trouble. You're in trouble because they're going to drag you down into the quicksand, pull you in and suffocate you, and that's what they did to the Jets. And I know the Jets had the last possession, and they got sacked twice.
But their defense still came through, though, even with that philosophy.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, that philosophy of we're going to control the tempo, we're going to control the game flow, we are going to control the context of the game. That's what they want to do more than anything else. They don't want to get into a scoring a match, where it's a scoreboard explosion. No, they don't want to do that. They don't want Nick throwing the ball 30-something times a game. They don't want their receivers to be catching 120 yards worth of passes. That's not what they want. They want to slow this game down to a crawl, make it a tortoise race. They feel their tortoise is going to beat your tortoise every time. So if you're the Giants, you got to try to take them out of that. It's just that simple. If you get into a tortoise versus tortoise race, now the game will be close. Maybe first team that gets to 20 wins. Excuse me.
I mean, based on Denver's strategy and what's been doing it for them, certainly 20 could be a ballpark figure to target.
Now, that's fine, okay? Because if the game's going to be close and a tug of war, it becomes much more of a coin toss and a toss-up if you're going to tell me it comes down to a field goal in the final 4 minutes of the game. I mean, then anybody can win. Any fluke play, any penalty call, anything that happens could change the final result. So if they want to play a game close to the vest like that, it's okay. You can do that and still squeeze one out. But I'll tell you this, it'd be a lot easier to get them out of their comfort zone. Get the Broncos out of their narrative. Get points on the board early. Like if the Giants can get 10 points, early in the game, like they did against the Chargers, get a 10-point lead.
To force their offense to have to pick up the pace and put points on the board. Yeah.
Now you're forcing the Broncos to get into an uncomfortable situation. Now they got to jump into the pool that they don't want to jump into. They want to stay dry. They don't want to have to towel off and get wet and towel off. That's not what they want. So you are better if you're the Giants, if you can somehow get that lead and then take them out of their comfort zone.
I'm looking at the two games that Denver lost this season to Indianapolis, and not to take anything away from the Colts, but remember, they had a field goal that was missed, and then there was a penalty.
A 60-yarder. Then they made a 45-yarder.
So in that game, just to go with your premise here, the Colts, they jumped out to a 13-7 lead in that game. Then Denver came back, and then it was really a seesaw battle, and Denver actually led until the Colts put together a rally. So I would say even Indiana didn't put Denver in an uncomfortable situation. Then their other loss was the Chargers, and from what I recall in that game too, because I remember following that along.
Field goal.
Yeah, that was another last-second field goal.
43 yards, I think.
That was, let's see, in terms of the last-second field goal, they put together an 8-play, 43-yard drive, and it was a 43-yard field goal by Dicker. But in terms of the deficit, if anything, that they faced, Chargers did jump out to a 10-0 lead in that game. Now, Denver came back and scored 17 unanswered, but if you're the Giants, you want to take the blueprint of the Chargers. You want to put the Broncos in a 10-0 deficit. And if you could do that, then you get to force Joe Lombardi and Sean Payton to have to rethink what they're doing on offense.
Correct.
And maybe Bo Nix is now put in a position where he has to take some chances. I don't think he's been put in that uncomfortable environment more often than not during the course of this season. So to use your analogy, okay, you did a lot of tortoise talking, okay? What we have not mentioned at all in this conversation is the hare. The poor hare, okay? So the Giants, you want to be the hare early on. You know the old cliche, get off to a fast start? So take on the hare philosophy, okay?
I agree.
That's what they need to do.
I agree.
But you don't want to run too far past the tortoise, though, okay? Based on the old stories here. All right, we're really digging deep here on Friday's BBKL.
Again, I get it. Everyone's going to say, well, don't you always want to get off to a fast start? No, I understand that.
Well, that's why I said it was a cliched line.
Right.
Sure.
It's just that because of the narrative that the Broncos want to use and how they want to dictate how the game is going to be played out, you'd rather make them a little bit more uncomfortable and make them come out of their shell just a little bit. It doesn't mean you're going to win the game. It just makes it a little more interesting because now the Broncos, when they step out of their shell, they're going to be taking a little bit more of a risk than they usually would otherwise. If you let them control the narrative, they're not going to take any risks. I'm telling you that right now. If you've looked at the numbers on Bo Nix, and if you watch the tape of what they do, it's Dobbins, bang, 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 bang. Nix, short, short, short,
a lot of that.
short, short. That's what, they don't take risks because they don't have to.
This to me, and I'm glad you just alluded to that because this is the statistic that hammers home what you're talking about, okay? Nix has an 82% completion percentage on throws under 10 air yards this season, okay? So that's the prototypical definition of a short pass, meaning he's getting rid of the ball, he's relying on his running backs, his wide receivers to get yardage after the catch. They're not going for the home run. It's basically, to use the baseball analogy, he's playing for singles and doubles. Yeah. That's what his offensive philosophy is, okay? So they have not forced him to then get into where all of a sudden the numbers change here, okay? 10-plus air yards this season. His completion percentage is 38%. Now think about that, Paul. We go from 82% to 38%.
Pretty dramatic.
Okay? When you're going over 10 yards. So you put the Broncos in a trailing position where now they need to speed things up. He's not going to be able to necessarily dink and dunk. Now, it depends on how much time is left in the game. They can maybe get away with that, but they're going to want to take a few more chances. You want Nix to have to increase his at-bats with 10-plus air yards. And, hey, if he completes them, you tip your cap. But you at least want to test the waters and see whether or not these numbers and these trends continue.
And everybody knows I'm a huge Bo Nix fan. I was coming out of the draft, and I still am.
Well, you're wearing an Oregon Duck shirt underneath.
Yeah, right.
That Giants quarter.
But that doesn't change the fact that you still want to give the Broncos a change of pace. You don't want to let them rule the road. And they're going to want to play this game at 20 miles an hour. And if you can get it up to 40 miles an hour, I do think it enhances your chances to beat them.
All right, so that's the layout of the land in terms of some of the latest, how Paul and I see the game here on BBKL. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. We're broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. You want to weigh in on the tortoise versus the hare. Everything is on full display. It's all up for debate as we open up the phone lines here and we check in with Jonathan in Westchester joining us on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Jonathan? What do you got for us?
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
So it's interesting, when people call to criticize Joe Shane, they often talk about some of his draft picks, Evan Neal and Tay Banks and Hyatt. And, although those criticisms are warranted, you very rarely hear those people also talk about Brian Burns. And I think, to be fair, you need to talk about Brian Burns and give Shane a ton of credit for the Brian Burns trade. So what's amazing is that the Giants only gave up a 2024 second-round pick and a 2025 fifth-round pick. And the trade was made when Burns was only 26 years old. You don't see 26-year-old top-level pass rushers change teams every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's Burns, it's Parsons, and, that's all I could think about, all I could think of recently. So On top of that, they signed Burns to a 5-year contract. I think the reported amount was $87.5 million guaranteed, which is not a ton of money for a top-level defensive end. And then you fast forward to this year, and I heard Tiki Barber say this. I mean, Burns is having like a Defensive Player of the Year season. He's got 7 sacks, team highs of QB hits with 11, and tackles for loss with 9. I mean, he's just an important, couldn't be having a more important role than he is for the Giants. So I think, people who call to criticize Shane need to take that into account, to be fair to him. Wanted to get your thoughts.
All right, Jonathan, we'll let you go on that note. And the one thing I'll add, Paul, before perhaps you jump in, the caller brought up the fact that the contract extension was handed out, and that's just as critical because you don't want to rent a player, especially when you give up assets. So when you're acquiring a player, especially at that age, it's a must. You have to get the extension done. So that was a big development in terms of the Giants front office. And I have said this time and time again, draft picks are unknown assets. As valuable and as great as they are, you can't guarantee that they're going to turn into, if you use them in the draft, to Brian Burns-esque production or Micah Parsons or whatever other elite pass rusher you want. So when you could take those draft picks, however high, medium, or low they are, and you're bringing in a known commodity, meaning you have a good idea of what that player is bringing to the table, that's, at least on paper, a home run because you're taking the risk out of what would be more so utilizing the draft picks and rolling the dice.
Well, I certainly agree with the point about Brian Burns. I mean, anybody who's watched him since he's gotten to the Giants would be foolish not to call him, easily one of their top 3 players on the roster. Is that fair? Dexter Lawrence is going to be right there. Malik Neighbors is hurt this year, but I think if you look at the last 2 seasons, it would be Lawrence, Neighbors, and Burns, would it not?
No, I think that's a very fair assessment.
Yeah. So there's no way in the world anybody could be critical of Joe Schoen for the Burns deal or the extension. I think just to be fair about this, Joe Schoen would tell you himself that his player acquisitions during his time with the Giants have been mixed. There have been a bunch of good guys and folks who are still here and hopefully are going to be part of this turnaround. And then there have been other players who just did not do what they were expected to do and have been disappointing. So I think overall, to get away from the isolation of the Burns deal, I think the results have been mixed. But that's the point. They're mixed. There are those people who go way overboard on the criticism side and say that Joe Schoen hasn't done a very good job at all and this team isn't better off than they were when he took over. And of course, that's absolutely incorrect. This team is better off than when he came in, even though they did make the playoffs that first year. I get that. But you look at this roster right now, I'm sorry, it is better off. That's just the way I see it.
Well, I think it comes down to, and you and I have had this conversation many times on this program, but I think it's relevant to the point at large here, that if the Giants are going to make inroads, it has to come from a grouping of draft classes, right, Paul?
Sure.
It's not just one guy that's going to be a savior. So that's at least how I assess the roster. So have you accumulated enough over the last few years that these guys, you believe, still have a chance to be part of the nucleus of what will, you hope, build success or at least consistency? So, I mean, right now, and it's still too premature to judge the 2025 class, but Scadaboo and Dart at least appear to be staples in that conversation. Then you go to the previous year. Neighbors, we know, is a part of that. With respect to the other members of that class, I think we've seen flashes. Theo Johnson has shown flashes. Tyrone Tracy, he's now coming back from injury. Drew Phillips, Tyler Nubin. I think the jury is still out with that foursome, but there at least have been some flashes that they can be contributors. And then I'll go back to the 2023 class. You know, that's the one class where maybe you want a little bit more at this point. That's Deonte Banks, that's John Michael Schmitz, and that's Jalen Hyatt. So right. I think at this stage, given the fact that we're now 2-3 years, more. I think you wanted more meat on the bone.
I would agree with that.
So once again, 24-25, we're still in the dissecting phase, but it's fair to say 23, those were your top 3 picks in 23. I don't think that the return has been, and I think if you ask anyone in the building, they'd say the same thing. You didn't get the bang for the buck, at least where we are at this stage.
Right. And that's why it's important for a guy like Hyatt. There's still a lot of season left to go here. It is his third season in the league, and we always talk about breaking out in year number 3. Well, the sand is going through the hourglass. It better happen pretty soon if he's going to break out. Now, he did have some production in the game against Philly, and I say it's not included in the stats, but when he burned the secondary and got into the end zone on that long pass down the left corner, forcing the pass interference call that made it a 1st and goal at the 1, okay, it doesn't go on his stats, but that was a play. He made a play there. Yeah. So we at least saw a flicker. Let's see how much more he can do.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because it doesn't show up in the box score, but if you ask the coaches when they evaluate the film and grade the player, if you force and you get pass interference calls against the opposition, I mean, that's a win because that dramatically shifts field position.
No doubt.
And there are a lot of players that are talented in drawing the flags against the opponent. It's not just necessarily members of the Giants. You can use plenty of other examples and top players across the league. And once again, from a fantasy perspective or a real-life box score, you're not going to get a catch, you're not going to get credit, but you flip the script and you flip the field, and that may have ultimately led to a scoring opportunity. So that is a big development, at least on that front. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We got Kevin in Arizona with us. Kevin, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to say I was watching that game last night between the Steelers and the
Bengals.
The Bengals, and I noticed that near the end of the game, the Steelers remind me very much of the Denver defense with the quick outside rush, and I noticed they couldn't touch Flacco because Flacco didn't take a deep drop, and I think this might be something we could look forward to, make sure that Jackson doesn't take really deep drops against those two outside pass rushers. I also agree with you guys 100% on attacking the flats, the screen game, and getting the backs involved out of the backfield against those linebackers. I think that's a very, very wise observation. So anyway, I just think it's going to be a lot closer game than everybody thinks. And I think they got to be just very careful not to take drops and things like that. They're going to be put Jackson in some bad ways with those outside pass rushers and then attack the flats. Because when you look at all their past games, it looks like the flats were always wide open, but nobody attacked them, especially the Jets. I mean, they had lots of space to throw the ball on the outside, and I didn't see them really attack that. They tried to throw the ball up the middle.
The Jets game, I mean, I watched that live, but besides then watching the video of it, I just my head just kept shaking back and forth. I was like, look, I get it. The Broncos are the top-rated defense in this league. Please don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. But every defense in this league is going to have some dents in the armor. And you have a responsibility to do what you can to try to maximize whatever value you can out of attacking those dents. And the Jets never did it.
I think part of that is Justin Fields has a tendency to hold on to the football
no doubt
longer than most quarterbacks. So I think it's the philosophy of the QB that even if the flats were open, he was looking more down the field to create something as opposed to just taking what the defense gives him. So Dart has to look at it through the lens of, A, it goes without saying, the best way to neutralize a pass rush is to get rid of the football so you don't give them time to even get in the vicinity of the quarterback. But he also has to say, you know what? I don't need to throw the ball 20 to 30 yards down the field. I could dump it off to even Wan'Dale Robinson. And Wan'Dale Robinson could turn a 4-yard catch into a 7 or an 8-yard gain. And you know what? Now all of a sudden, it's a much more manageable second or third down. So when you go up against Denver, the philosophy has to be you don't need to be sexy. Okay? It could come across as ugly. It could be a grind it out. You may have to put together a 12-play, 85-yard drive that just milks clock. But if it leads to a good result, so be it, as opposed to the flashy highlights. And I think if Dart adopts that, then that certainly would bode well for the Giants.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that on defensively, you talked about it earlier, how Bo doesn't take a deep drop. He likes to throw the little 10-yarder in passes. Well, this means that our defensive line, instead of coming hard off the edge,
get those hands up,
put pressure up the middle, and get their hands up.
Yep.
And try to deflect some passes.
That's why the Chauncey Golston injury is bothersome to me. He was downgraded yesterday.
He was, yeah.
We don't know where he stands today. Last season with the Dallas Cowboys, he had his best NFL campaign. Not only did he have 5.5 sacks, which was his career high, and he was very active and was really coming into his own, he was also very good at batting down passes. We saw that during the offseason here with the Giants. From the moment he got onto campus, he was becoming a real pain in the butt of getting his hands up and deflecting passes and knocking them down at the line. Now, since the season has started, to be frank with you, I haven't seen the production out of him that I wanted to see. He also has been battling injuries.
He's been limited,
and I believe he's missed at least 2 games so far this season. I really, really would love to see Golston be able to give them something in Denver. But we will see.
And appreciate the phone call, Kevin. Thanks so much for giving us a ring. Yeah, you got it. I think interesting points. I would also reverse it and say Denver, in terms of the avoiding deep drops that the last caller mentioned, that all is dependent on, can the Giants' interior offensive line win its battles against the DJ Joneses, John Franklin Myers. I mean, we talked about the edge guys, Zach Allen and Nick Bonito, but, Denver's got some power up front, and John Franklin Myers made it back-to-back Defensive Player of the Week awards for the Broncos, so he's a bit of an underrated guy. Jonathan Cooper is another player. All of these players that are thrown into the mix, they find a way. Vance Joseph's pushing the right button. So if the interior wins, then Dart is going to have that pocket to move up in, and he doesn't have to extend plays, which would give Denver time because they cover very well on the back end, and he'll get rid of the football quicker to prevent the opportunity for the Broncos to finish plays and get those sacks, which they have been piling up. It's a neck injury that Paul was referencing for Golston. He was limited the other day and then downgraded to a DNP on Thursday. Now, the other thing that I wanted to look up, because you had mentioned that the production hasn't been there, and part of it is I just don't think he's had a lot of at-bats in comparison to Dallas. So I'm looking up. Golston this season has played, he's played just under, Paul, 11% of the defensive snaps this season. Mm-hmm. It's hard. I mean, I'm not making an excuse. That's the reality. What you're expecting him to do with just 11% of the snaps, and not you, I'm talking out loud, it's very tough sledding. Just to give you an idea, last season in Dallas, Golston played 72% of the defensive snaps. Now, we're still early in the season, but we're talking about just under 11 to 72%. You go to most players, you say, we're going to boost your snap count to the mid-70s. They're going to say, I like my chances of my production increasing and skyrocketing. So I think that would explain on top of the injuries.
I would also say if you do something very valuable with your limited snaps, chances are they will increase. Well, it works both ways.
Well, I think Azeez Ojulari is a good example, right? One of his last seasons with the Giants. Remember, he didn't get a lot of snaps, but the sack rate was at least high under those circumstances. So, no, that's also a fair point, but I think that combined with the injuries would explain why Golston maybe has not been able to capitalize on his limited
I'm not
work.
discounting that.
Yeah. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Kay in Patterson. Kay, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How you guys doing? Good
doing
afternoon.
Well. Hi. Same to you. What's on your mind?
Hey, I had a question.
We hopefully have an answer.
The kicker, number 99, the kicker.
McAtamney.
What's up with this guy? He can't kick off?
No, it has nothing to do with his ability to kick off. Gillen is a left-footed kicker. And Coach Gobriel, the special teams coordinator, strategically is going to make a decision every week as to who's going to handle kickoffs, because he looks at the other team's special teams unit, he looks at their return guys, and he decides, the kinds of kicks that Gillen can do, especially with the left-footed spin and the trajectory of the ball, that may be advantageous against that particular opponent. And so that's why they've been doing it that way. McAtamney has as strong a leg as practically any kicker in this league. He really does have a cannon.
Okay. I just was wondering.
And, of course, a lot of that's also the whole landing zone ball placement thing, too. If they think that on a particular week that the ball placement may be more important than maybe just booming it, that could also be a reason that you would lean toward Gillen on a particular day.
Okay, it makes a lot of sense. One more thing. I think that we're going to win this game. I'm very optimistic about it. I watched the game last week, and both teams looked terrible, honestly. The defense, of course, they had 9 sacks, but I feel like if Jackson Dart and the guys, everybody, the collective unit, plays sound football fundamentally, I think that we'll beat this team. And that's all I got to say, guys.
All right, Kay. Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. Like Paul and I said earlier, this is a Denver offense that they're averaging around 21 points per game. And despite that, they're still 4-2. So that spells out all you need to know as to how much the defense has given them a position of luxury. But if you can't run the football against the Broncos and you also don't protect the football, all of a sudden, all bets are off. So the Giants could be right there, and this game could be for the taking, but it's contingent upon those other 2 factors working in their favor. This is not the type of matchup where you just meet the Broncos halfway and you say, okay, job is done. You got to bring it to them, and you've got to put them in a position where they have to feel uncomfortable. I don't think enough teams have done that. As Paul and I went over, I think the Colts and the Chargers, who are the 2 victors over the Broncos this season, had stretches where they were able to accomplish that. But then again, Denver trailed by double digits and overcame both of those deficits. So I would say if you're looking for a comfort zone, if there is anything in the NFL to that degree, you really want, I would say, about a 15-point cushion to feel better about maybe what you
Who gets those?
Well, once again, I understand it's rare, but that's where I think you can maybe get a little bit even creative in terms of your approach. But if you're even within 10 points or less, I mean, that's nothing. That's essentially still a one-possession game as far as I'm concerned with the way that NFL games go in terms of the ebbs and flows. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We've got Steven in Alabama with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Steven?
What's going on? How you guys doing?
Doing all right.
Hi.
What's happening? What's on your mind?
Well, obviously, tons of trade talks this week with wide receivers possibly coming to the Giants. Obviously, Waddle's been a big one. A lot of the fans have been talking about. Wanted to see what you guys' thought was of getting Cole Evans, possibly the undrafted free agent from Dordt College. Have you guys ever heard of him?
I haven't.
No, I have not.
And I'll be honest with you, too. The Miami Dolphins just came out earlier today. Their coach had just come out and said that as far as all the trade rumors involving our players, none of those things are true right now. And so, as you know, Jalen Waddle is a Miami Dolphin. And I know that there are a lot of folks out there who've been throwing his name around New York thinking that he might wind up here. Well, the Dolphins at this point are denying any conversations involving a Waddle trade. So take that for what it's worth. That's the Miami response to that rumor. So I know you mentioned Waddle just moments ago because you've undoubtedly read it here in the papers. The folks in Miami are not buying along that scenario.
All right, Steven.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the phone call. And here's the other thing. If you're going to trade, I brought this up with Matt earlier in the week. If you're going to trade for a wide receiver, it should be somebody who's more in the long-term plans. If you're even going to explore and go down that road, Paul. I'm not a huge fan of giving up assets, especially where the current team is situated, for a rental for a year. I just don't see how that helps them in the short term and the long term.
You don't have a third-round pick next year. So if you're going to make a deal, what are you going to be moving? A 2, which is really painful to do. It's very valuable to a team.
It depends on the quality of the player. Yeah.
And what are you going to get for a 4? You might not get a whole lot in terms of an upgrade for a 4th rounder. So to your point, that may not make a whole lot of sense. I would say this. I would agree with you that if you're going to dip into that phone call and say, hey, what do you got? What do you want? Blah, 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 blah. That receiver better be a darn good receiver. If I'm general manager of Team X and I'm in need of a higher caliber receiver, I actually would want to talk about a Waddle, or I would want to talk about a Judy, because those guys are young enough, but they've also proven enough. They are reasonably priced in terms of their contracts, and I believe they also have more than a year left, each of those guys, on their deals. So those would be the targets if I were Team X. Again, we don't speak for the Giants on this program. If I were Team X looking for a high caliber receiver, those would be two of the guys who I would be more interested in. I think I'd be a bit scared with Olave's history of concussions. That would be a bit of an issue for me if I was going to make a deal, because I'd want this guy not only to be here for this year, but I'd want the guy to be here as part of the future success.
And that's my point. That's
like
exactly my point. Yep.
And, you know, if my head coach had connections to the college program, Alabama, where Judy and Waddle had come from, if that were the case in hypothetical Team X, that would probably also be a factor that I would consider.
Well, interestingly, both of those players recently signed extensions, and Waddle, his fifth-year option was picked up in April of last year, and then they gave him a 3-year extension, which now is extremely reasonable because, I mean, at the time it was, according to reports, right around $85 million for 3 years. I guess I'm just looking at it from a different angle. Based on what Miami has him on the books and his age, I mean, why would you want to part ways with that player?
I don't know.
Right? I mean, that doesn't make much sense, logically speaking, from the Dolphins' perspective. I mean, for the Giants, I get it, because he fits what we're talking about. Multiple years left on the contract, coming off the rookie contract. I get all that. But I'm looking at it, you have a reasonable guy under contract if you're Miami. So that is a bit bizarre. And once again, these are all rumors. We're not saying that anything is specific or anything is actually beyond rumors and substantive talks. We're just commenting on what you have all seen out there. From Miami's lens, it doesn't make any sense. I don't get it.
The thing that we keep hearing from the national insiders and the former GMs and coaches who are part of the media these days, you hear like Todd Haley said on Sirius NFL XM radio the other day, I think there are going to be 12 deals. Over-under is 12.
Well, that's what Schefter was reporting.
He said that too?
Yeah, ESPN's Adam
on
Schefter.
November 4th is the deadline, by the way.
Yeah, Schefter had come out and said, after we saw a sprinkle of a trade or two, he said, be prepared that like every Tuesday leading up to the trade deadline, there's a good chance there's going to be a deal. So he was the first one that came out with that idea that be prepared, buckle up, that it's going to be busy maybe than normal. And I think that's why they also moved the trade deadline back, because they wanted teams to have a better idea and a longer period of time to assess where they are in the standings.
That is correct. And it does appear that the wide receiver position is the one that's most talked about.
Well, and I think the reason why it's also talked about is you've got some teams that have good receivers that, from a standings perspective, are not in great shape. So you would think, all right, maybe they want to offload. But again, even if you have a down year, you still got to come back and bring back a roster the following season. So this idea that a team wants to break things up, I mean, I get it with Jerry Jeudy. He's in Cleveland. So where the Browns are, based on their circumstances, if they wanted to shake things up, Miami is not fully underwater. I know it's been tough sledding for them, but based on what they gave him, remember, Waddle's also a homegrown Dolphin. Judy's not. So it's a little bit different because he came from Denver. So that thought process also has entered my mind. But hey, sometimes teams, they don't necessarily follow the rule of thumb that perhaps we would subscribe to. And there are quality guys that at least have been tossed out there. But again, if you're the Giants, at least my personal opinion, I'd want somebody who has a few years left on the contract so that you could say, hey, we're going to put them next to neighbors and build around Dart, as opposed to, maybe keep our head above water for a stretch of games for the remainder of the season. I just don't see how that helps them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you don't want the Giants to be going into the next 2 or 3 years with Neighbors as the head and shoulders guy above everyone else on the receiving corps. If you can get another potential 1,000-yard receiving threat in that room, well, that's something that would be attractive to you. And beyond this season, that's the whole point.
Well, and also the styles of how they mesh with Neighbors, too.
Yes.
You know, that's the other thing that we haven't talked about. I think Waddle and Judy would complement Neighbors' skill set.
On Team X.
Listen, we're talking about hypotheticals and rumors. We're not, spelling out anything.
I like to be very careful.
Okay, well, I will emphasize it again, even with Paul next to me. This is all rumors and hypotheticals. There is no substance behind anything that we're throwing out here. We're just fitting pieces into a puzzle that is in a dream world, okay?
There you go.
Let's put it under that umbrella. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We got Big Ed in Maryland with us. Big Ed, what's happening?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Doing all right. So what do you have for us today?
Oh, okay. Sorry about what happened the other day. Caught me by surprise, but that's okay. I was referring to the strategy of understanding. We're going 5,000 square feet above sea level. So getting used to that thin air is so important, even though for a short period of time on Sunday afternoon. Right? So here's the other thing of it. The strategy of it is to this one here. Okay, guys, we're pretty much almost equally matched to them. They are a really good and solid football team, but so are we. So the key to this whole thing will be attacking them the way the Colts attacked them and the way the Chargers attacked them. Now, since we beat the Chargers, that means we could beat the Broncos, period. The key to us, though, is same way like we did Philly. You just can't turn the ball over, and you cannot have a whole bunch of mental mistakes, a bunch of penalties, and we got to be careful of that pass interference too.
Big Ed, I gotta throw up a real bright red flag. I mentioned this on yesterday's show. If you did not hear it, the Giants and the Broncos are two of the 5 most penalized teams in the NFL this year. Okay? I'm talking about flags thrown against them, not accepted penalties. I'm talking about flags thrown against them. It is an epidemic for these two teams.
All the more reason, Paulie, why we got to play that fundamental sound ball. And particularly, something I was watching, particularly watching the game last night, I'm sure y'all watched it too. I watched that tight end of the Steelers,
Freiermouth,
be wide open down the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He go wide open down the field.
Yep.
And I keep seeing this over and over. And I understand, to one part, because from playing football, you know, you do what the coach tell you. But at the same time, you got to have common sense to know, wait a minute, even though this guy may not be my assignment, let me stay close to him anyway, just in case, because what's been shown is that too many people being left wide open. And if you're going to think you're going to let Bo Nix sit back there at home and throw the ball all over the field without being checked, you're going to have a problem. But it's so simple to understand. This is going to be a close game. It's going to come down to who got it last, seemed like. So
easily could be.
Could be, yeah. Well, I mean, listen, a lot of Broncos games have come down to the wire. So, I mean, Denver's been in those types of games. I mean, the Giants have had mixed results in terms of those type of games. But if they hold true to a lot of the characteristics and factors that Paul and I have outlined, I mean, there is a pathway. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, there's a lot of caveats connected to all of that. And you've got to be able to make sure that you put Denver, once again, in their home stadium, by the way. They're honoring the Super Bowl 50 team. I mean, not that this is necessarily going to have an influence, but, you know, I'm sure the crowd's going to be hyped. And it's more of a reason why if you can jump out to an early lead on them, you take the crowd out of it, maybe that environment changes compared to what it's going to be like in the pregame.
Big
that
Ed,
could also
Big Ed, you talked about the altitude a little bit ago when you came on to the program. And here's what I do know, okay? I've talked to guys who coached and played out in Denver before. And here's where it does become a factor. as the game goes on, if a player gets worn out at some point during the game, it becomes almost impossible for him to rejuvenate and to catch his breath and to get his second wind. It's a lot easier to try to pace a guy. Use your rotations, use your sub packages, and pace the guy throughout the 4 quarters. But if you get the Broncos, for example, on 12-play drives, on 3 consecutive possessions, and the Giants defenders got their tongues hanging out of their face masks and they're sucking wind, those guys are not going to be able to recover and regenerate their oxygen levels and their conditioning levels. They are going to run out of gas, and in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, it's going to be a major league advantage for the Broncos, which is all the more reason why in their building, when Lance and I discussed about getting off to a faster start, getting that lead, that's another reason why you would rather have a lead in Denver, because there is a chance that some of your guys may start to struggle down the stretch of that ball game.
And Big Ed, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. As we're talking about this very subject, and the more and more I'm looking over the Denver schedule, what's interesting is their 2 losses came on the road indoors and indoors. So the more and more you connect the dots, whereas the 2 teams, and remember, they just played overseas, so I'm not going to count this last game against the Jets, but the 2 actual home games that they had, Tennessee put up 12 and Cincinnati scored 3. And I know the Bengals with Joe Burrow and everything, but just goes to show you there's been a drastic difference even in terms of the lack of production for the opposing teams when they've actually headed to the Mile High, and how the Broncos pretty much dominated both of those affairs. And granted, Cam Ward, it was his first start. I understand there's context here.
You don't even have to go there. The Broncos control the narrative of those games. They force the other team to play the Broncos style of game. And when you do that in their building, it's a problem. And don't even try to think about trying to play catch up late in the game. Because in that atmosphere, it does become a factor.
And also they have really good cover guys on the back end, too.
Yes.
So forget the pass rush. At that point, now all of a sudden you're attacking Pat Surtain. Do you really want to go after
Actually, you want to go at Riley is what you want to do.
Well, but even some of those other guys are no slouches, though.
I didn't say they were.
No, I'm not saying that you were. But, yes, it's the lesser of 2 evils, I guess, is the way you look at it. But still not a favorable matchup based on at least that hypothetical situation. All right, that is going to wrap up Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, the final installment of Broncos-Giants preview before we actually play this game on Sunday, as we're broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Paul, good dialogue as always.
Yeah, I just can't wait.
Mile High.
I can't wait to get into this game because it seems like we've been talking about it for 3 weeks.
We have. Well, it's been quite the lengthy conversation. Well, listen, the Broncos and the Giants have bought into this matchup, and they've provided the substance on that front. So that's why it's been some interesting conversation. But certainly appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back up and running again on Monday, same time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern here on BBKL. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll see you next time right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.